Not every attack against your life comes with chaos, noise, or obvious evil. Some of the most dangerous spiritual warfare you will ever face arrives quietly, dressed as familiarity, comfort, concern, and even love. The devil rarely confronts you directly because direct confrontation awakens resistance. Instead, he studies you patiently and looks for the closest access point. People who can reach your emotions, influence your thoughts, and shape your perception without raising suspicion. The enemy understands something many people ignore. If he can influence who surrounds you, he can influence how you see yourself. He does not need to break you overnight. He only needs to slowly weaken your spirit through repeated exposure to discouragement, confusion, doubt, and emotional disturbance. Over time, your confidence erodes, your clarity fades, and your purpose begins to feel heavy instead of inspired. This is why the devil uses people, not because they are evil, but because they are available. Wounded people, jealous people, insecure people, emotionally unstable people, and spiritually unaware people often become tools without realizing it. They speak words they think are harmless, yet those words plant seeds that grow into fear, hesitation, and self-doubt inside you. The most dangerous attacks are not loud arguments or open betrayal. They are subtle comments, repeated criticism, disguised concern, and quiet discouragement. Statements that sound reasonable but leave you feeling smaller afterward. Advice that appears helpful but slowly disconnects you from your intuition, your faith, and your inner peace. The enemy's strategy is simple. If he can keep your spirit unsettled, he can keep you distracted. If he can keep you emotionally reactive, he can keep you spiritually weak. A disturbed spirit cannot hear clearly, discern clearly, or move confidently. Many people lose spiritual battles not because they are weak, but because they never realize they are under attack. They think the problem is their personality, their luck, or their circumstances, when in reality, their spirit has been under constant pressure from external influence. One of the clearest signs that the enemy is at work through people is when your peace consistently disappears around certain individuals. You feel drained after interactions, your mind races afterwards, you replay conversations, you question yourself more than before. Peace is not supposed to evaporate in healthy connections. The devil knows that if he attacked you directly, you would resist, pray, fight back, and stand firm. But when the pressure comes through people you trust, you hesitate. You excuse behavior. You doubt your discernment. And that hesitation is exactly where spiritual vulnerability begins. Protecting your spirit starts with awareness. You cannot guard what you do not recognize. Spiritual protection is not about isolation. It is about discernment, knowing what strengthens you and what quietly drains you. Many people confuse being loving with being unguarded. But even love requires wisdom. You can have compassion without allowing constant access to your inner world. Your spirit is sacred, and not everyone is qualified to influence it. The enemy often attacks right before growth. When you are on the edge of change, clarity, or elevation, resistance increases. People may suddenly misunderstand you, challenge your decisions, or question your direction. This is not random, it is strategic. Words carry spiritual weight. Repeated exposure to doubt, negativity, and fear slowly programs the mind and weakens the spirit. What you allow into your ears eventually settles into your heart. That is why protecting your spirit is not optional. It is survival. Without protection, you begin to normalize heaviness. You start calling exhaustion normal. You call confusion life. You call anxiety just stress. Meanwhile, your spirit is signaling that something is wrong. A protected spirit does not react to everything. It observes, it discerns, it pauses before responding. The enemy hates patience because patience exposes manipulation. When your spirit is unguarded, you become emotionally accessible to everything and everyone. When your spirit is protected, you become selective. Not cold, not arrogant, but wise. Some people are not meant to walk with you through every season. Their assignment ends, but because you are emotionally attached, you allow expired influence to remain. This creates spiritual friction and internal unrest. The devil often hides behind urgency. He pushes people to pressure you, rush you, and emotionally corner you into decisions. A protected spirit does not move under pressure. It moves under clarity. Awareness alone changes the battlefield. The moment you realize that not every interaction is neutral, you regain authority. Discernment shifts you from victim to observer. You were not created to absorb everyone's chaos. You were created to carry light, clarity, and purpose. But light must be protected, or it will be constantly challenged by darkness. This is where spiritual protection begins, not with fear, but with understanding, not with suspicion, but with wisdom. And once you understand how the enemy operates through people, you stop blaming yourself for feeling drained, confused, or unsettled. The enemy does not force his way into your life. He looks for permission. That permission often comes disguised as familiarity, loyalty, obligation, or emotional attachment. When you feel unable to say no, unable to set limits, or afraid to disappoint, a doorway quietly opens. The devil understands human emotion deeply, and he uses it as leverage against the spirit. One of the most common access points is unhealed wounds. People who are hurting often project their pain without realizing it. Their words carry frustration, resentment, insecurity, and fear. When you consistently absorb that energy, your spirit begins to carry weight that was never meant to be yours. The enemy exploits emotional closeness. The closer someone is to you, the less guarded you tend to be. You share freely, trust easily, and lower your defenses. This is not a flaw, it is human. But without discernment, closeness becomes exposure. Notice how certain conversations always circle back to doubt, limitation, or discouragement. The devil does not need people to attack you outright. He only needs them to repeatedly remind you of what could go wrong, why something might fail, or why you should stay where you are. Another access point is comparison. People influenced by insecurity often compare themselves to you, subtly pulling you into competition. They may question your pace, your progress, or your direction. Over time, comparison disrupts gratitude and replaces it with restlessness. The enemy also uses gossip as a spiritual weapon. Gossip is not just information, it is contamination. When you listen to constant negativity about others, your spirit absorbs judgment, suspicion, and heaviness. This clouds discernment and hardens the heart. Familiar voices carry authority. When the same doubt is repeated by someone you respect, it begins to sound like wisdom. This is how lies slowly replace intuition. The enemy knows repetition weakens resistance. Emotional dependency is another opening. When you rely on people for validation, approval, or identity, your spirit becomes externally regulated. The enemy thrives when your peace depends on others' reactions. Watch for patterns of interruption. When you are focused, motivated, or spiritually aligned, certain people suddenly appear with drama, problems, or emotional urgency. This is not coincidence. It is distraction. The enemy often uses humor to mask harm. Sarcasm, jokes, and just kidding comments can carry criticism that slowly erodes confidence. Words spoken lightly can still wound deeply. Access is also gained through guilt. When you feel responsible for everyone's emotions, you become easy to manipulate. The devil uses guilt to keep you emotionally available, even when your spirit is exhausted. People under influence may constantly challenge your boundaries. They push for explanations, demand access, and react negatively when you protect your space. Resistance to boundaries is a sign that boundaries are necessary. The enemy prefers subtlety over force. Sudden chaos awakens awareness, but slow erosion goes unnoticed. Day by day, your enthusiasm dulls, your clarity fades, and your joy feels distant. Not everyone who disrupts your spirit intends harm, but impact matters more than intention. Discernment does not accuse, it observes. The devil also uses silence. Some people withdraw support when you grow, withhold encouragement, or become distant during your progress. This silent resistance can be just as powerful as open opposition. When your spirit is unprotected, you begin explaining yourself too much. You feel the need to justify your choices, your pace, and your growth. Over-explaining is often a response to unseen pressure. The enemy understands timing. He sends interference when you are tired, emotionally open, or transitioning between seasons. Vulnerable moments attract influence. Pay attention to emotional aftermath. Healthy interactions leave you grounded. Harmful ones leave you unsettled, replaying conversations or questioning yourself. Access is maintained through familiarity. Even when you sense something is off, routine convinces you to ignore intuition. That's just how they are becomes an excuse that costs peace. Once you recognize these patterns, power shifts. Awareness closes doors the enemy once walked through freely. Protecting your spirit begins with a decision, a quiet but firm choice that your inner peace is no longer negotiable. This decision does not make you selfish, it makes you spiritually responsible. When you value your spirit, you stop allowing constant access to people, conversations, and environments that disturb your inner balance. One of the strongest forms of protection is discernment, not confrontation. You do not need to announce boundaries to everyone. Some boundaries are enforced through distance, silence, and selective engagement. The enemy loses power when you stop explaining yourself. Guard what enters your mind daily. What you repeatedly hear becomes what you eventually believe. Negative speech, fear-based talk, and hopeless narratives slowly shape your internal dialogue. A protected spirit chooses truth over noise. Learn to pause before responding. Immediate reactions often come from emotion, not wisdom. Stillness allows your spirit to regain control. The enemy thrives on impulsive reactions. Calm frustrates manipulation. Silence is not weakness, it is strategy. Not every comment deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes the most powerful protection is refusing to engage. Prayer is alignment, not ritual. When you pray, you are not begging, you are reconnecting. A connected spirit becomes difficult to influence because it draws strength from a higher source. Protect your mornings. The first voices you listen to often set the tone for your spirit. Begin your day with grounding, stillness, gratitude, or truth before exposing yourself to outside influence. Emotional boundaries are just as important as physical ones. You can care without caring. You can listen without absorbing. Other people's chaos is not your assignment. Watch your inner language. How you speak to yourself matters. Self-criticism weakens spiritual defenses, while self-awareness strengthens them. The enemy often uses urgency to bypass discernment. When you feel pressured to decide quickly, step back. A protected spirit does not rush. Choose environments that nourish your spirit. Constant exposure to drama, conflict, or negativity slowly trains your nervous system to live in survival mode. Peace is a condition your spirit needs to function properly. Protect your spirit by limiting access to your vulnerabilities. Not everyone who listens understands. Some collect information not to support, but to interfere. Learn to sit with discomfort without reacting. Discomfort does not always mean danger. Sometimes it is the discomfort of growth. Discernment helps you tell the difference. A protected spirit is not defensive. It is grounded. It does not need constant validation or approval because it is rooted internally. Forgiveness is protection, not permission. When you forgive, you release emotional hooks that keep others connected to your inner world. Rest is spiritual maintenance. Exhaustion lowers discernment. A tired spirit becomes vulnerable to influence, doubt, and emotional manipulation. Guard your focus. Scattered attention weakens spiritual clarity. The enemy loves distraction because it keeps you fragmented. You do not need to be everywhere or available to everyone. Availability is access, and access should be earned. Trust your internal signals. Unease, heaviness, or loss of peace are messages, not flaws. Your spirit communicates before your mind understands. Protection is not isolation. It is alignment. When your inner world is aligned, external influence loses power. There comes a moment in spiritual growth when protection no longer looks like endurance, patience, or explanation. It looks like distance. Not everyone who once walked with you is meant to continue with you, and recognizing this is not failure. It is discernment maturing. The enemy often resists distance because distance breaks access. When someone no longer has constant emotional reach into your life, their influence weakens. This is why you may feel internal resistance, guilt, or fear when considering separation, even when your spirit knows it is necessary. Distance does not always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means fewer conversations, shorter responses, and reduced emotional availability. Quiet withdrawal can be more powerful than loud departure. Watch how people respond when you create space. Those aligned with your growth will respect it. Those benefiting from your exhaustion will challenge it. Resistance to distance often reveals unhealthy dependence. The devil uses obligation to keep harmful connections alive. I owe them, they've been there before, or I don't want to hurt them become chains that keep your spirit exposed. Protection sometimes requires choosing yourself without apology. Distance clarifies everything. When you step back, patterns become obvious. You see who only contacted you when they needed something and who valued you beyond utility. You may notice that peace increases as distance grows. This is not coincidence. Peace is confirmation that alignment is returning. The enemy uses familiarity to dull discernment. What you tolerate repeatedly begins to feel normal, even when it is unhealthy. Distance resets perspective. Some people drain you not through malice, but through constant need. Their problems become your problems. Their emotions become your responsibility. Distance teaches your spirit to breathe again. Letting go of someone does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. Distance is often misunderstood as rejection. In truth, it is self-respect. You can honor people without allowing constant access to your inner world. The enemy fears distance because distance restores clarity. Once clarity returns, manipulation becomes obvious and loses its grip. You may grieve during this stage, not because the person was good for you, but because you hoped they would change. Grief is part of release. Do not rush this process. Detachment unfolds gradually. Forced separation without internal clarity can reopen doors later. Distance reveals spiritual alignment. When you are aligned internally, external chaos no longer pulls you back. The devil often tempts you to return through guilt or nostalgia. Memories soften reality. Discernment remembers impact, not intention. Distance strengthens. Boundaries without distance are easily violated. You are not abandoning anyone. You are responding to what your spirit has been communicating all along. Healthy people do not require you to lose yourself to stay connected. Alignment does not demand self-betrayal. As distance settles, emotional noise fades. Your thoughts slow. Your clarity deepens. Your peace stabilizes. This is when healing accelerates. Without constant interference, your spirit recalibrates. Distance is not the end. It is the beginning of realignment. The enemy loses leverage when emotional access is removed. Influence weakens without proximity. You may notice fewer conversations, but more peace. Less explanation, more confidence. Distance restores authority. You are no longer reacting. You are choosing. This stage requires courage. Letting go of familiar pain can feel harder than enduring it. But freedom always costs something. Do not confuse loneliness with loss. Loneliness is temporary. Alignment is permanent. Distance does not harden your heart. It protects it. You become quieter here but stronger. What leaves now creates space for what aligns next. The enemy's voice grows quieter when access is removed. You no longer feel pulled, pressured, or drained. Peace becomes your new normal. Distance has done its work. Your spirit feels lighter, clearer, and more grounded. This is not isolation. It is preparation. You are learning to choose alignment over attachment. What remains after distance is truth. Your spirit now recognizes when to step forward and when to step away. And in this discernment, protection becomes strength. Once you begin protecting your spirit, resistance often increases. This is because manipulation loses power when awareness rises. People who once had easy access to your emotions may begin to react differently through guilt, pressure, confusion, or subtle intimidation. This reaction is not proof that you are wrong. It is evidence that something unhealthy is losing control. The enemy does not retreat quietly. When manipulation no longer works through comfort, it often switches to control. Shows up as emotional pressure, silent treatment, exaggerated reactions, or making you feel responsible for other people's peace. Recognizing this pattern is a major step toward freedom. One of the strongest tools used against your spirit is guilt. Guilt convinces you that protecting yourself is selfish, unloving, or cruel. But guilt that drains your peace is not from God. It is a tool of bondage. Breaking free begins when you stop negotiating your boundaries. A boundary that must be constantly defended is not a boundary. It is a suggestion. Your spirit needs consistency to feel safe. Manipulation thrives on your emotional reaction. When you stop reacting, control weakens. Calmness removes fuel. Silence disrupts strategy. Detachment restores power. The enemy often uses confusion to keep you stuck. Mixed messages, shifting expectations, and emotional unpredictability keep your spirit unsettled. Clarity is protection. Confusion is exposure. You do not need to win arguments to win spiritually. Many battles are lost because people try to prove instead of protect. Your peace is more valuable than being understood. Breaking free requires grieving what you hope people would be. Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that someone cannot meet you where you are spiritually. Letting go of expectation is an act of liberation. Manipulative influence weakens when you stop sharing your inner process. Not everyone deserves access to your healing journey. Privacy strengthens recovery. The enemy often pressures you to return to old patterns through nostalgia. Familiarity feels safe, even when it was harmful. But growth requires leaving what once felt comfortable. When you choose peace, some people will accuse you of changing. They are right. You are changing.